Hades was the ancient Greek chthonic god of the underworld, which eventually took his name. In Greek mythology, Hades was regarded as the oldest son of Cronus and Rhea, although the last son regurgitated by his father. He and his brothers Zeus and Poseidon defeated the father's generation of gods, the Titans, and claimed rulership over the cosmos. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the air, and Poseidon the sea, with the solid earth, along the province of Gaia, available to all three concurrently. Hades was often portrayed with his three-headed guard dog Cerberus and, in later mythological authors, associated with the helm of darkness and Abaddon. The Etruscan god Ater and Roman gods Dispater and Orcus were eventually taken as equivalent to the Greek Hades and merged as Pluto, a Latinization of his euphemistic Greek name Pluton. The origin of Hades' name is uncertain, but has generally been seen as meaning the unseen one since antiquity. An extensive section of Plato's dialogue Cratylus is devoted to the etymology of the god's name, in which Socrates is arguing for a folk etymology not from unseen but from his knowledge of all noble things. Modern linguists have proposed the Proto-Greek from *wides. The earliest attested form is Hades, which lacks the proposed digamma. West argues instead for an original meaning of the one who presides over, meeting up from the universality of de. In Ionic and Epic Greek, he was known as Hades. Other poetic variations of the name include Adoneus and the inflected forms Eidos, Ad, and Aida, whose reconstructed nominative case *Ais is, however, not attested. The name as it came to be known in classical times was Hydes. Later the iota became silent, then a subscript marking, and finally omitted entirely, perhaps from fear of pronouncing his name. Around the 5th century BC, the Greeks started referring to Hades as Pluto, with a root meaning wealthy, considering that from the abode below come riches. Pluton became the Roman god who both rules the underworld and distributed riches from below. This deity was a mixture of the Greek god Hades and the Eleusinian icon Plautos, and from this he also received a priestess, which was not previously practiced in Greece. More elaborate names of the same genre were Plautodotes or Plautodoa, meaning giver of wealth. Epithets of Hades include Aegisander and Aegisalaus, both from Ago and an Alaus, describing Hades as the god who carries away all. Nicander uses the form Hagesilaus. He was also referred to as Zeus Katachthonios, meaning the Zeus of the underworld, by those avoiding his actual name, as he had complete control over the underworld. Greek god of the underworld. In Greek mythology, Hades, the god of the underworld, was a son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea. He had 3 sisters, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, as well as 2 brothers, Zeus, the youngest of the 3, and Poseidon. Upon reaching adulthood, Zeus managed to force his father to disgorge his siblings. After the release, the 6 younger gods, along with allies they managed to gather, challenged the elder gods for power in the Titanomachy, a divine war. The war lasted for 10 years and ended with the victory of the younger gods. Following the victory, according to a single famous passage in the Iliad, Hades and his 2 brothers, Poseidon and Zeus, drew lots for realms to rule. Zeus received the sky, Poseidon received the seas, and Hades received the underworld, the unseen realm to which the souls of the dead go upon leaving the world, as well as any and all things beneath the earth. Some myths suggest that Hades was dissatisfied with his turnout, but he had no choice and moved to his new realm. The underworld was Hades' eternal domain, meaning he would spend the majority of his time there. Hades obtained his wife and queen, Persephone, through abduction at the behest of Zeus. This myth is the most important one Hades takes part in. It also connected the Eleusinian mysteries with the Olympian pantheon. particularly as represented in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, which is the oldest story of the abduction, most likely dating back to the beginning of the 6th century BC. Helios told the grieving Demeter that Hades was not unworthy as a consort for Persephone. Adonis, the ruler of many, is no unfitting husband among the deathless gods for your child, being your own brother and born of the same stock. Also, for honor, he has that third share which he received when division was made at the first, and is appointed lord of those among whom he dwells. Homeric hymn to Demeter. Despite modern connotations of death as evil, Hades was actually more altruistically inclined in mythology. Hades was often portrayed as passive rather than evil. His role was often maintaining relative balance. However, he was depicted as cold, stern, and gave all his subjects equal treatment in regards to his laws. Any other individual aspects of his personality are not given, as Greeks refrained from giving him much thought to avoid attracting his attention. Hades ruled the dead, assisted by others over whom he had complete authority. The house of Hades was described as full of guests, though he rarely left the underworld. He cared little about what happened in the upper world, as his primary attention was ensuring none of his subjects ever left. When he did venture above ground, he generally wore his helmet of invisibility, which he obtained from the Cyclopes. He strictly forbade his subjects to leave his domain and would become quite enraged when anyone tried to leave, or if someone tried to steal the souls from his realm. His wrath was equally terrible for anyone who tried to cheat death or otherwise crossed him, as Sisyphus and Pirithoeus found out to their sorrow. While usually indifferent to his subjects, Hades was very focused on the punishment of these two people, particularly Pirithoeus, as he entered the underworld in an attempt to steal Persephone for himself, and consequently was forced onto the chair of forgetfulness. Another myth is about the Roman god Asclepius. Was originally a demigod, fathered by Apollo and birthed by Cronus, a Thessalian princess. During his lifetime, he became a famous and talented physician, who eventually was able to bring the dead back to life. Feeling cheated, Pluton persuaded Jupiter to kill him with a thunderbolt. After his death, he was brought to Olympus where he became a god. Hades was only depicted outside of the underworld once in myth, and even that is believed to have been an instance where he had just left the gates of the underworld, which was when Heracles shot him with an arrow as Hades was attempting to defend the city of Plius. After he was shot, however, he traveled to Olympus to heal. Besides Heracles, the only other living people who ventured to the underworld were all heroes: Odysseus, Aeneas, Orpheus, who Hades showed uncharacteristic mercy towards at Persephone's persuasion, who was moved by Orpheus's music; Theseus with Pirithoeus, and, in a late romance, Psyche. None of them were pleased with what they witnessed in the realm of the dead. In particular, the Greek war hero Achilles, whom Odysseus conjured with a blood libation, said, "O shining Odysseus, never tried to console me for dying. I would rather follow the plough as thrall to another man, one with no land allotted to him and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead." Achilles sold to Odysseus. Homer, Odyssey 11.488-491. Cult. Hades, as the god of the dead, was a fearsome figure to those still living, in no hurry to meet him. They were reluctant to swear oaths in his name, and averted their faces when sacrificing to him, since to many, simply to say the word Hades was frightening. Euphemisms were pressed into use. Since precious minerals come from under the earth, he was considered to have control of these as well, and was referred to as Pi Lambda Omicron Upsilon Tau Omega Nu, Latinized as Pluto. Sophocles explained referring to Hades as the rich one with these words: "The gloomy Hades enriches himself with our sighs and our tears." Quote, In addition, he was called Clymenus, Polydegmon, and perhaps Eubuleus, all of them euphemisms for a name that was unsafe to pronounce, which evolved into epithets. He spent most of the time in his dark realm. Formidable in battle, he proved his ferocity in the famous Titanomachy, the Battle of the Olympians versus the Titans, which established the rule of Zeus. Feared and loathed, Hades embodied the inexorable finality of death. Why do we loathe Hades more than any god, if not because he is so adamantine and unyielding? The rhetorical question is Agamemnon's. He was not, however, an evil god, for although he was stern, cruel, and unpitying, he was still just. Hades ruled the underworld and was therefore most often associated with death and feared by men. But he was not death itself. The actual embodiment of death was Thanatos. When the Greeks propitiated Hades, they banged their hands on the ground to be sure he would hear them. Black animals, such as sheep, were sacrificed to him, and the very vehemence of the rejection of human sacrifice expressed in myth suggests an unspoken memory of some distant past. The blood from all chthonic sacrifices, including those to propitiate Hades, dripped into a pit, a cleft in the ground. The person who offered the sacrifice had to avert his face. One ancient source says that he possessed the cap of invisibility. His chariot, drawn by 4 black horses, made for a fearsome and impressive sight. His other ordinary attributes were the narcissus and cypress plants, the key of Hades and Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. The philosopher Heraclitus, unifying opposites, declared that Hades and Dionysus, the very essence of indestructible life, are the same god. Among other evidence, Cronus notes that the grieving goddess Demeter refused to drink wine, which is the gift of Dionysus, after Persephone's abduction, because of this association, and suggests that Hades may in fact have been a cover name for the underworld Dionysus. He suggests that this dual identity may have been familiar to those who came into contact with the mysteries. One of the epithets of Dionysus was Thonios, meaning the subterranean. Artistic representations. Hades was depicted so infrequently in artwork, as well as mythology, because the Greeks were so afraid of him. His artistic representations, which are generally found in archaic pottery, are not even concretely thought of as the deity. However, at this point in time it is heavily believed that the figures illustrated are indeed Hades. He was later presented in the classical arts in the depictions of the rape of Persephone. Within these illustrations, Hades was often young, yet he was also shown as varying ages in other works. Due to this lack of depictions, there weren't very strict guidelines when representing the deity. On pottery, he has a dark beard and is presented as a stately figure on an ebony throne. Quote, he has a few symbolic icons, such as a bird-tipped scepter and a key, which both represented his control over the underworld and acted as a reminder that the gates of the underworld were always locked so that souls could not leave, even if the doors were open. Cerberus, the 3-headed god-dog of the underworld, ensured that while all souls were allowed to enter into the underworld freely, none could ever escape. The dog is often portrayed next to the god as a means of easy identification, since no other deity relates to it so directly. Sometimes artists painted Hades as looking away from the other gods, as he was disliked by them as well as humans. As Pluton, he was regarded in a more positive light. He holds a cornucopia representing the gifts he bestows upon people as well as fertility, which he becomes connected to. Persephone, the consort of Hades, was Persephone, represented by the Greeks as the beautiful daughter of Demeter. Persephone did not submit to Hades willingly, but was abducted by him while picking flowers in the fields of Nysa. In protest of his act, Demeter cast a curse on the land and there was a great famine, though one by 1. The gods came to request she lift it, lest mankind perish. She asserted that the earth would remain barren until she saw her daughter again. Finally, Zeus intervened via Hermes. He requested that Hades return Persephone. Hades complied, but he on his part secretly gave her sweet pomegranate seed to eat, taking care for himself that she might not remain continually with grave, dark-robed Demeter. Demeter questioned Persephone on her return to light and air. But if you have tasted food, you must go back again beneath the secret places of the earth, that dwell a third part of the seasons every year. Yet for the 2 parts you shall be with me and the other deathless gods. This bound her to Hades and the underworld, much to the dismay of Demeter. It is not clear whether Persephone was accomplice to the ploy. Zeus proposed a compromise, to which all parties agreed. Of the year, Persephone would spend 1/3 with her husband. It is during this time that winter casts on the earth an aspect of sadness and mourning. Theseus and Pirithoeus. Theseus and Pirithoeus pledged to kidnap and marry daughters of Zeus. Theseus chose Helen, and together they kidnapped her and decided to hold on to her until she was old enough to marry. Pirithoeus chose Persephone. They left Helen with Theseus's mother Aethra and traveled to the underworld. Hades knew of the plan to capture his wife, so he pretended to offer them hospitality and set a feast. As soon as the pair sat down, snakes coiled around their feet and held them there. Theseus was eventually rescued by Heracles, but Pirithoeus remained trapped as punishment for daring to seek the wife of a god for his own. Heracles' final labor was to capture Cerberus. First, Heracles went to Eleusis to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries. He did this to absolve himself of guilt for killing the centaurs and to learn how to enter and exit the underworld alive. He found the entrance to the underworld at Tanarum. Athena and Hermes helped him through and back from Hades. Heracles asked Hades for permission to take Cerberus. Hades agreed as long as Heracles didn't harm Cerberus. When Heracles dragged the dog out of Hades, he passed through the cavern Erisha. According to Ovid, Hades pursued and would have won the nymph Minth, associated with the river Cocytus, had not Persephone turned Minth into the plant called mint. Realm of Hades. In older Greek myths, the realm of Hades is the misty and gloomy abode of the dead, where all mortals go. Very few mortals could leave Hades once they entered. The exceptions, Heracles and Theseus, are heroic. Even Odysseus in his Necky calls up the spirits of the departed, rather than descend to them. Later Greek philosophy introduced the idea that all mortals are judged after death and are either rewarded or cursed. There were several sections of the realm of Hades, including Elysium, the Asphodel Meadows, and Tartarus. Greek mythographers were not perfectly consistent about the geography of the afterlife. A contrasting myth of the afterlife concerns the Garden of the Hesperides, often identified with the Isles of the Blessed, where the blessed heroes made well. In Roman mythology, the entrance to the underworld located at Avernus, a crater near Cumae, was the route Aeneas used to descend to the realm of the dead. By synecdoche, Avernus could be substituted for the underworld as a whole. The Inferi were a collective of underworld divinities. For Hellenes, the deceased entered the underworld by crossing the Styx, ferried across by Care and Chion, who charged an obelisk, a small coin for passage placed in the mouth of the deceased by pious relatives. Paupers and the friendless gathered for 100 years on the near shore according to Book V of Virgil's Aeneid. Greeks offered propitiatory libations to prevent the deceased from returning to the upper world to haunt those who had not given them a proper burial. The far side of the river was guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed dog defeated by Heracles. Passing beyond Cerberus, the shades of the departed entered the land of the dead to be judged. The 5 rivers of the realm of Hades, and the symbolic meanings, are Acheron, Cocytus, Phlegethon, Lethe, and Styx, the river upon which even the gods swore and in which Achilles was dipped to render him invincible. The Styx forms the boundary between the upper and lower worlds. See also Eridanos. The first region of Hades comprises the fields of Asphodel, described in Odyssey, where the shades of heroes wander despondently among lesser spirits, who twitter around them like bats. Only libations of blood offered to them in the world of the living can reawaken in them for a time the sensations of humanity. Beyond lay Erebus, which could be taken for a euphonym of Hades, whose own name was Dread. There were 2 pools, that of Lethe, where the common souls flocked to erase all memory, and the pool of Mnemosyne, where the initiates of the mysteries drank instead. In the forecourt of the palace of Hades and Persephone sit the 3 judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. There at the trivium sacred to Hecate, where 3 roads meet, souls are judged. Return to the fields of Asphodel if they are neither virtuous nor evil, sent by the road to Tartarus if they are impious or evil, or sent to Elysium with the blameless heroes. In the Sibylline oracles, a curious hodgepodge of Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian elements, Hades again appears as the abode of the dead, and by way of folk etymology, it even derives Hades from the name Adam, saying it is because he was the first to enter there. Owing to its appearance in the New Testament of the Bible, Hades also has a distinct meaning in Christianity. Genealogy, popular culture, bibliography. Gantz, Timothy, Early Greek Myth, A Guide to Literary and Artistic Sources, Johns Hopkins University Press, 1996, 2 volumes, ISBN 9780801853609, ISBN 9780801853623. Gailey, Charles Mills, The Classic Myths in English Literature and in Art, based originally on Bullfinch's Age of Fable, Ginn and Company, 1911. Internet Archive. Hesiod, Theogony, in the Homeric Hymns and Homerica, with an English translation by Hugh G. Evelyn White, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, London. William Heinemann Limited. 1914. Online version at the Perseus Digital Library. Homer, The Iliad with an English translation by T. Murray, Ph.D., in 2 volumes. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, London. William Heinemann Limited. 1924. Online version at the Perseus Digital Library. Homer, The Odyssey with an English translation by T. Murray, Ph.D., in 2 volumes. Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, London. William Heinemann Limited. 1919. Online version at the Perseus Digital Library. Courtney, Carl, The Gods of the Greeks, Thames and Hudson, London, 1951. Courtney, Carl, Elysis, Archetypal Image of Mother and Daughter, Princeton University Press. ISBN 0-691-019150. Courtney, Carl, Dionysos, Archetypal Image of Indestructible Life, Princeton University Press, ISBN 0-691-098638. Tripp, Edward, Crowell's Handbook of Classical Mythology, Tycroilco, 1st edition. ISBN 0690226008X.